having the knowledge, skills and behaviours to become effective organisational members. So what's interesting here, so just checking that everybody can now hear. It seems that some people can't. So I'm going to keep talking so that you can definitely tell. Yeah, okay, you can hear me. Great, sorry about that. So just for those who couldn't hear a moment ago, we're going to be talking about a business case for why on board before moving into what makes good onboarding with some examples. So in terms of what onboarding is, we're really talking about the knowledge, skills and behaviours to become effective organisational members. And members is an interesting word and a good one to find in the definition here, because really it's about being an active participant. It's about being a two-way member of an organisation. And it's great that the Wikipedia definition has the word behaviours in there too. We're talking about people becoming members of a culture and having to behave in a kind of certain way really to fit in and be effective within that organisation. So why on board? What's the business case behind onboarding? Why bother doing it? Well, quick question for you, and you can use the poll in the bottom right area of your screen, is what percentage of people do you think leave their organisation within the first year? So you can do a little vote there. I'll give you a few seconds to have a go. Thanks for those that are voting. Okay. And to reveal the answer, sorry for those who haven't done it yet, I'm going to jump in. And it's around a third of people leave an organisation within their first year. So you're pretty spot on actually in your guesses there. It's also the case that 22% of staff turnover actually occurs in the first 6 weeks. So 1 in 5 people that are going to leave in that first 6-week window, which is kind of a vulnerable period after hiring somebody in. So staff turnover isn't to be gawked at, it's actually an expensive business. So how much do you think it costs an organisation to lose someone in their first year? So we put down here as the next poll is a series of numbers that represent how many times someone's salary it costs that business. So you've got 1.5 times, 2 times or 3 times somebody's salary. So I'll give you a few seconds to have a go. Okay, so most of you look to have gone for 2 times the salary. It can cost up to 3 times someone's salary if they leave in their first year. And across the UK, PwC estimate that it costs £42 billion. And that's based on 1 time somebody's salary and the amount of people that leave in that first year. So that could go up from there. So it's a substantial cost. Now you might be listening to this thinking, well, we're not quite in that boat, we're pretty good in our turnover, we have onboarding in place, and that probably indicates you're doing something right. But the reason we're putting this forward is because this is the difference that onboarding can make. So the top line there is when people do above average onboarding, when people do great onboarding, they can retain 91% of their staff. Whereas those who do kind of average onboarding retain around 30% of their staff. So it's a massive difference. But it's not only about retention, it's also about performance. So those who do great onboarding, who do above average onboarding, hit their performance targets much, much quicker than those who don't. So there's a massive business case, we think, for doing onboarding. Now, I don't know how many of you are currently doing onboarding. I had to look at the results, but on average only 50% of people in this country, of organisations in the UK, actually invest in onboarding programmes. And half of those last no more than a month, some last a week, and some just last a day. And yet we've got this kind of vulnerable period of 6 weeks in particular where lots of people decide to leave. So we think there's a proper case for not only doing onboarding, but it's got to be of the right length, but more than that, it's got to be the right quality. It's got to be good. So what is good onboarding? Now we're going to weigh up a couple of different sides to the coin. We're going to compare an organisation's needs versus the needs of a new recruit. And the reason for that is we think that the latter side of that, the new recruit's needs, are sometimes overlooked, or an assumption is made that they're the same as an organisation's needs. So what does an organisation need from their onboarding programme? Now we've created a kind of Maslow-like hierarchy, which really starts with 2 core needs. Now you've hired somebody and you need them to be able to do a job. So you need them to become competent and you need them to get competent quickly. So you need them to be able to use any processes, tools, have the right skills, and ideally get to a point where they can work without support, because support is expensive, right? But you also need them to be compliant. You need them to be legal. You need them to work within any internal policies and regulations. So those two we see are the foundation needs for onboarding. And most people that come to talk to us about their onboarding programs will come in at kind of that level. That's what they want their onboarding program to cover. Now beyond that and moving up, there's kind of a cultural sense to onboarding, getting people involved with where the company's going, what the strategy is, and moving up from there, obviously making relationships and connections and having that kind of sense of belonging in an organisation, and then following on from that, moving into personal development and growing with that company, ideally to stick around. So what about new starters? At the end of someone's first day, what would you like them to say in response? Are they really going to say, well, you know, this place is great, I'm really compliant now, and I'm well on my way to memorising lots of processes and procedures, and I look forward to implementing them as soon as I have a context in which to do so. Well, we don't think so, and we don't imagine that you actually really want your new starters to be going home and saying that at the end of their first day or first week. Really, what we want new starters to say is, it's great, I really like the feel of it, or I can ask questions, I'm getting a sense of what it's like to work there, people are really friendly. What we're talking about here are emotions, we're talking about feelings. And so if we was to show a hierarchy of needs for individuals that join an organisation, we think that that sense of connection, the sense of belonging, and we've used the word love, you might find that a bit strong, but the idea of people, connecting with people and having a sense that you want to stick around, you know, that you like it there, is actually fundamental. And moving up from that, people want to have a sense of what's expected of them. And maybe as they move into the first few weeks or first month of joining a new organisation, they want to feel they're supported along their personal development channels. And after, you know, a couple of months, they'll get to a point where they have job satisfaction. And job satisfaction doesn't only come from doing their job well and meeting their targets, but from feeling valued and from feeling listened to. So we think there's a potential conflict. On the one side, organisations need people to get up to speed quickly. So organisations often give everything to people in their onboarding programs in one go. It's kind of a one hit of lots of information. But on the other side, we know that, or we think that new recruits crave feelings, and that people are key to this. So research shows that it's the manager connection in particular that can make or break somebody staying in an organisation. There's a great quote in Forbes, it's slightly cynical, but you know, I pulled it out here, where they say, you know, often onboarding programs can come across to people like, you know, welcome, you should be proud to work here, please fit in accordingly. There's a sense of putting a culture upon somebody. On the other side, you know, you hire somebody for who they are as much as what they can do. And people want to be listened to and valued. Often we hire people for their new blood and their fresh perspectives, and then sort of accidentally transform that by onboarding them into the way the company works, rather than listening to the way that person works. So you can miss out on their kind of great insights and ideas. So on the one side, we would say that organisations need to get to competence and compliance efficiently, need to get there quickly. Whereas new recruits are really looking for empathy, they're really looking for that connection and those emotional connections and sense of feelings they can have to make them stick around. Now the good news is we think that both of these elements can be met. We think that onboarding programs can be both efficient and empathetic. But perhaps one of the problems at the moment is that the empathy side isn't considered enough, and that's what we want to kind of put out there. So we put together a framework which we like to use with our clients when we look at the kind of blend design for onboarding. And we've called it, surprise, surprise, the Efficiency and Empathy Framework. And you can find out more details about this in our guide. So just to explain it briefly, if I can just go on to the next slide. So you've got the empathy strand and then the efficiency strand. So high empathy will be where learning or or experiences around onboarding will be very tailored around someone's personal needs and have emotional connections with that person. Whereas low empathy might be more of a one-hit wonder, one solution for all, that doesn't necessarily tailor to somebody's needs. And efficiency, well, a high efficiency example would be e-learning, for example, where it's one solution for lots of people, and low efficiency would be more like one-to-one personal interventions. So to give you an idea of what might be in these quadrants, we'll start with the bottom right. So high empathy, low efficiency strategies would include, for example, coaching and mentoring. It's very tailored to somebody's individual needs, but it's low efficiency because it's obviously one-on-one. But this could also include job shadowing or some group sessions. But you can still be high empathetic and have high efficiency by, for example, capturing stories from what it's like to work in different parts of the organisation and digitalising them. You've made them efficient by putting them online, but they're still very personable. Using forums and social media, again, you can have high empathy and high efficiency. And very well designed simulations and games that allow people to learn through their own mistakes and almost tailor their own learning experience around their own needs. So the top left area is a kind of common area that you see in onboarding programs, and this might include generic training such as compliance or a welcome video from a leader, online tests and so on. The bottom left is a kind of slightly questionable area, as you think, well, what's the point of doing low empathy and low efficiency interventions? So if you have a classroom session which is very one way and doesn't allow for questions or any tailoring to the audience, or an info-based webcast where again you're not allowing people to talk and discuss, you could argue that's both low empathy and low efficiency. But the key with this is actually to combine things together, so that if you use some of those bottom left items, if you then follow it up with a group session, an action learning group or coaching and mentoring, then suddenly you've got more empathy into your blend. So we're not ruling any of these out, but what we'd like to do is see more of a shift over to the right hand side and see some of those elements coming into blends too. So I'm going to hand over to Nina, who's going to talk to you about some of the examples that we've done with some of our clients, and also an example blend, just to put out there some new ideas for approaching onboarding.
Hi everybody, so thanks to Kirsty for taking us through some fantastic theory there around how onboarding reaches out to people when they first start and right through their journey. What we're going to look at now is how we bring your onboarding experience together and what are some of the tasks that you or somebody you might commission would go through to help you bring this very large experience together into a coherent journey. We've then put together a sample blend that we'll walk through. And we'll talk about some of the components that we've put in there and how they reach out to your high, low empathy and efficiency areas. We'll talk a little bit about the use of technology within the blend, relate all of this back to the efficiency and empathy framework, and we've got some great examples to share with you along the way. So let's first start talking about how we organise your programme. We have some customers who, some of which their onboarding programmes are at least 100 days long. And they've been running like that for quite a long time, and there's a mixture of kind of some online components but also quite heavy on the offline. And when they've come to talk to us, it's been very much, you know what, this is so big, I don't know where to start in terms of starting to bring this together as a coherent blend and in a way that's compatible to the audience that we need to deliver it to. So one of the things that we do with our customers to help with this is to run a one-day session. And this one-day session works through a number of components. The very first one being about building a visual of the present. So what we get our customers to do is to map out everything that they have within their induction at the moment, assuming that they have one, if not they're coming with a blank canvas. And we get them to map out the various subjects, how they're delivered at the moment, and what duration each of those run for. Moving on from there, we start to explore and learn about the different types of delivery mechanisms. So we run some presentations that sort of show them PDFs, virtual classrooms, e-learning, video, animations, all those different types of mechanisms that we can use to deliver with an induction. We talk through each of those components so they can start to understand how their subjects might be able to apply to the right type of technology approach. This naturally allows us to move on to the next stage, which is all about building a vision of the future. So we take all of those subjects and components and we start to look at them in how they can now be delivered. So are they best delivered as a PDF? Would they be best delivered as a form of mentorship, e-learning, face-to-face, etc.? It could be that what was originally a 3-day course could now be reduced down to 1 day with some e-learning that then supports it around the edge. To close off this section, we start to examine the personas and the learner types of those that we're creating the learning for. And this is really important because we want the programme to be high efficiency, but we also, for the needs of the business, but we also want it to have high empathy, meeting the needs of the learner. Now that we understand the subjects, the delivery mechanisms and the audiences we're delivering to, we can design a blend with an onboarding programme that meets the needs of the empathy and efficiency framework. We can create a personalised, empathetic journey through understanding the learner type of the learner, in turn creating a high-efficiency programme through effective learning technology, appropriate offline activity, a journey tailored to the way the learner likes to learn. In all of this, we get to create a faster, more effective method of uptaking knowledge, and that's done through learning the way that the learner feels best to learn, a sense of belonging and being cared for through the various ways we've introduced high empathy, and knowing what you need to know when you need to know it, and not bombarding them too far up the front when actually they need to know things at the point at which they can apply it. So once we've designed all of this programme, our customers then get to go off and turn that into something that's a bit more real. So what we've done is put together a mock example of a blend that might come out of something like that workshop. And we've broken it down into a 2-week programme, and it actually starts at the point at which we're looking to hire people. And I noticed in the chat room earlier somebody was mentioning about where does recruitment start and end, and onboarding start and end, etc. And this might actually start to give a little bit of insight into that. We believe that onboarding actually starts prior to them being hired, and to some respect it could start right from the point at which they're deciding to apply for a job. So we believe that actually if you introduce your onboarding experience as part of the application process, it gives you the opportunity to set expectations around you and your business. What do you expect from them as an individual working from you, but also it gives them an opportunity to understand what kind of a business they're about to apply to have a job with, and are you the kind of business that they want to work with. This in turn enables you to recruit the right people, hopefully, right from the beginning of the recruitment process. It gives you an opportunity also to market your business. So when we look at some of the examples that we show you in a bit, one of those is Barclays Onboarding. And it's done in a way that's very fun, it's light-hearted, it's energetic, and it says a lot about the business and who they are and what they represent. And hopefully, if people are brought into that very early on, they'll market you and your business out to other people and hopefully help with the recruitment process. The onboarding experience that we can see up in front of us at the moment, which is the connect and attract, it's also all about welcoming people in, helping them to become motivated from day one, excited about any new adventures, and it's about setting expectations. When we come to the pre-start, it could be that some of this is reiterating what happened right at the connect and attract phase. So when you send out somebody's offer letter, you may well be sending them out again, the same onboarding experience or a variation of it. So we have a welcome animation maybe that says, "Welcome aboard, we're so excited that you're joining us." Maybe there's an opportunity for them to see some photos around meeting the team. Maybe there's a portal that has lots of knowledge that they can start to embed in before they start on day one. Maybe there's some HR policies and forms. And this is really also thinking about your persona types. If you've got someone who's more inclined to want to read lots up front before they join on day one, this is absolutely perfect. It means they can turn up feeling confident, engaged, and ready to start from the very first day. When we move into the next stage, we start talking about day one of their onboarding. And what you'll slowly start to see as we move through these periods in our mock blend is that we reference back to Kirsty's point around manager connection is the make or break of whether somebody really enjoys their time with you in the business and onboards effectively and efficiently. We've really taken that on board by making sure that there are sections of the blend that represent that all the way through. So day one's about introducing them to a buddy, It's about reiterating those expectations all over again. It's about an informal team meet, so getting them on board with their team members and starting to introduce them to their role. And we come into week 1. Now, what's quite interesting about the first 3 sections of that blend is that it's all about the employee. It's about making them feel like they belong, that they've made the right decision, and most importantly, it hits all the high empathy areas of the quadrant that Kirsty took you through earlier. As we start to move into week 1 onwards, it starts to become more about the employer. So there's still a good level of empathy in there, but it becomes about efficiency and it becomes about you getting on board with your job. So we've got some buddy goal setting in there. There's some simulations, so maybe you don't want to throw people directly in at the deep end, but you want to give them an opportunity to test out and dry run parts of their job. There's some shadowing in there to help build up their confidence. There's some online resources they can use as and when they're doing their job. And at the end of each day, as I mentioned earlier, we've captured the manager wrap-up sessions, which, as Kirsty mentioned earlier, are highly important. In our very final week, we're starting to move out of setting expectations. We're starting to move out from giving them the theory and the support and sense of belonging and really getting hands-on into the formal part of their job. So they've now got on-the-job tasks, they're doing formal skills training, they've had an action learning group, there's some compliance in there, some assignments, and also we're moving into reward and recognition as well. We recognise that with something as large as the induction programme, you've got to be able to keep people motivated, and part of that can be about rewarding them and helping them to feel like they're continuously being recognised as they go through their programme. So that's a little bit about our example blend, and we recognise that there are a number of things that affect the blend, right from everything that we go through in the workshop around understanding what you want within your onboarding blend, through to where it is that they are located, what kind of access to technology do they have, work patterns, and much, much more. And these are all things that we could help you with when you're designing your blend. So we brought up Kirsty's high empathy, high efficiency, low empathy framework there, and we've got some customer examples that we want to walk you through. We've got Barclays Onboarding, and we've got the TUI and the destinations piece. And what's interesting about these is we've been able to really mix them up. So the high efficiency, low empathy is the destinations bit. It's product knowledge, it's purely information focused. The Barclays Onboarding piece is really a mixture of everything. It's got some low empathy in there, it's very high efficiency, but it's also got some high empathy in there because there's some real personal points as you go through. And then finally, the TUI induction piece, we've been able to bring that into the high empathy zone, even though it's a virtual experience, by creating avatars and creating a personalised experience. Before I show you some of these examples, I want to take you through the City and Guilds food and drink portal. This was built by us for City and Guilds before we became City and Guilds, and it was all about being able to onboard people into the food and drink industry. It's got lots of very small components of learning in it, from PDFs, bits of video, you've got assessments, etc. So what I want to do is to take you through a quick walkthrough of what it looks like when you bring all of the 4 areas of the framework together and you wrap it up into a journey, which is what we would hope you would get as you start to come out of your blend design. So we start off on the home page of the food and drink portal, and the first area we focus on is the knowledge sharing repository. This is high efficiency and high empathy. It's an area where anybody in the induction programme can communicate with each other and they can share what they're experiencing as they go through that programme. Also on the home page, we've brought in digitalised stories, day in a life anecdotes. These are high efficiency, high empathy, and when we go through to the page, we can see here that we've got lots of stories, people talking about what it's like to be in the industry, but also people who work in it day and day, but also aspirational people who people would hopefully aim to become one day. As we move through, we've got milestones and recognised all the way through the system. So they have a route map that takes them through the various phases of the induction programme, which is great if you've got a very long one. But what we've managed to do with the portal is to make sure that people are being tracked on multiple levels. So they collect points, and those points are based on community participation, winning badges, so there's your reward and recognition on a very granular level. There's also some competition and challenges in there that enable them to engage as a group even when they don't work closely together. But there's also some offline activity where managers can go in and say, yes, this person's competent in a particular task, or the employee can go in and they can post up assignments, images, evidence, etc. So it's creating a high empathy experience out of what potentially could have been low empathy learning components. Here's an example of a course page, and we've broken the course page down into small modular topics. And you can see here that they're broken down into 2, 3 minutes, 1 minute. We can see what progress we're making with those tasks. And on the left-hand side here, we can see whether it's a game, it's an app, it's a bit of video, etc. The nice thing about breaking it down into small chunks is that you can formulate it into a journey by the way that you design it on the page, but also it makes it accessible as an ongoing resource beyond the point of learning. There's also some benefits to any of you who may be on this webinar who are particularly large organisations that have a number of brands sat underneath them. This method is particularly useful for multiple brands because it enables us to mix up the generic group communication with those that are more regionalised communication. So we can create a personalised learning journey either at brand level or even at role level if you want to make it that granular. So we've got a real mixture of resources here that's spread across high empathy, high efficiency and low efficiency. Okay, and then finally on the low efficiency, high empathy area, we've got here, it's a bit of an ugly screen, but it just gives you a little bit of an insight into where people can load up things and mentors, assessors, managers, etc. can read the areas that are being loaded up and they can also grade them as well. Okay, just some examples of the content that then resides within that portal. So we've got digital simulations, games and resources. This is a video where you watch a guy operating within the kitchen and you have to hit the buzzer every time you think he should have washed his hand. And this operates within the high efficiency area of the framework. We've got engaging PDFs that can be downloaded and sustained as resources. Once again, these are high efficiency but slightly low empathy. And I'm just, if you bear with me 2 seconds, I'm just going to swap over to some live demos. So I can then show you the TUI examples as well and the Barclays onboarding. Okay, so I'm going to show you the TUI one first. So this is the TUI induction. And interestingly, it's high efficiency, but it also has a degree of high empathy in there as well, and that's all about it being a personalised experience. So we can come into here and you can basically create your own avatar, or you can just randomise it if you wish. Your avatar will then share with you your learner journey. So this takes you through a little bit of insight into TUI travel, and as we move down, it tells you about them as a company and the various brands that reside within their organisation. We start to come through and we learn a little bit more about spreading smiles and why that's important to TUI, and experiences and creating dreams for their customers, product knowledge being the heart of what makes them a good company, and so forth. And your avatar will then follow you all the way through your learner journey. So it's high empathy and also high efficiency. This is an hour tutorial in total. And you'll see we've got a little bit of reward there going on as well, so we can see there's a completed area and a well done. And there are plenty of topics for them to work through. When we move into the product-based knowledge that we did for the TUI onboarding experience, we come into learning all about their destinations, and we can pick a particular location. These are low on the empathy, but very high efficiency, and they're about being able to scroll through the various areas of knowledge, and it tells you about the resorts, it tells you the highlights of that particular resort, what the top excursions are, and you can come into top tips, and then they've got links that push you through to other areas of their organisational knowledge. I've just seen a question pop up about whether these are responsibly designed, and the answer to that is yes. So if I just flick these back for you, and I start to drive them into mobile scale, hopefully you can see that these have now cleverly restructured themselves. If I go back to the globe on the menu as well, we can see that we no longer have a globe, we now have a consultini menu. Same with the Turi journey one as well. So originally you were looking at separate islands, you're now looking at a short menu instead, but you've still got your avatar, and your avatar will move through that journey for you. Very last one I want to show you on the tutorial experiences is the Barclays onboarding. The Barclays onboarding piece was the one that I mentioned is actually released to people ahead of them starting. It's advertised on their recruitment site, so it gives people the opportunity to learn more about the organisation before they actually make the decision to apply. And it's quite an interactive environment. We can scroll around the screens. It's quite fun and engaging. So a little top hat here. We've got great interactions to keep you engaged all the way through the module. And it's a mixed resource. So once again, it's high efficiency, but also there's some high empathy in there as well. You can move around at your own free will. We've got little bits of videos, there are PDFs to download, and there are also little quizzes as well. This was also released to people once they got their offer letter, so it combined right from the point of applying for the job, took them right through into them when they were offered the job. So those are the demos and examples that we wanted to walk you through. Hopefully that's created a bit of inspiration for you. And I'm now going to pass you back into the presentation so that Kirsty can finish you off with some top tips. So bear with me for a second. Okay, and over to you, Kirsty.
Great, thank you, Nina. So we've shown you some examples that hopefully has given you food for thought, and to top that off, we've put together 10 must-dos, and a bit more detail is available around these in the guide, as with all the parts we've talked about actually today, that you can get from our website. Just to rattle through some top tips, really the first one is begin with empathy, and beginning with empathy doesn't mean that you're ruling out efficiency. It just means that you're going to strike a chord with your new hires and have more chance for retention and quicker performance targets. Look to create an experience, not just training, and certainly not just an information dump. So when we look at blends, we're thinking about a journey and experience and how you're taking someone through those different emotions, from connections and belonging to really seeing a future for themselves in your company and developing their skills. Consider starting before the start date, as Nina's mentioned, either pre-hire or upon hiring. You can do both if you've got the budget to do that, and you can convince your stakeholders to give you the budget to do that. The research shows it doesn't have a large impact on people's retention rates. Make it outcome focused. So try and tailor your journey or experience that you're creating with people on onboarding around some actual actions or outcomes you expect from them. And make sure that you have people at the heart of it as well, and that managers are tied in with that. So if a manager is going to check in with somebody about how they're getting on, make it sure the manager knows what outcomes are expected, and are they helping and supporting that person on that journey. Gathering feedback, so making your onboarding experience two-way we think is really important, not only because people bring in fresh insights and might have ideas for improvements or different ways of doing things in your company, but also it's their onboarding and they're likely to have an opinion about how well it's working for them. So don't wait until the end of 3 months or the end of their probation to ask them how they thought it was, but involve them all the way through. Give them a forum to record their thoughts and ideas if you don't feel they can do that face to face. Look to build habits. So this is one you can do subtly, or you can do it overtly. But in your organisation, let's say you have your culture for communication is to try and encourage face to face around a certain task. Then don't set somebody a task within your onboarding where they have to complete a document or have to write an email about something, have them go and do that face-to-face conversation. So you can build the habits that you want that person to have within your organisation, the kind of cultural habits, through your onboarding. So think big, think beyond someone's role, have them do some job shadowing perhaps in other departments, allow them to see the big picture. Very commonly with onboarding we channel somebody into a particular role almost too quickly in some ways for them to be an active part, an active member of the whole community. And give it personality. You've seen some strong branding today in the examples that we've put forward, and that's not just about pretty pictures, that's about giving a brand identity in a sense. It really helps that sense of belonging. You can feel connection with something as well as with people if you connect with the brand and feel this consistency across all of your interventions, from the high efficiency ones to the high empathy and low efficiency ones. So make sure your forum has the same feeling as your PDFs and your e-learning and so on. So that's 10 tips or must-dos from us, and as I say, you can find out more in our guide. But I think we've got a few minutes left, and oh yeah, there's some ways that you can access more information. But we've got a few minutes left, so I guess it'd be a good idea for us to open up and see what questions you guys have got, and any other ones you might want to add up to the chat. So Nikki had a question. When you're in an environment like a bank, how are they using action learning sets? So action learning being a high empathy, perhaps slightly lower efficiency intervention, but one a bit like with any peer-to-peer learning we would advise is a good idea to bring in. Actually, the example blend that we walked through, I'm looking to Nina, not that you guys can see me doing that, was actually for a banking environment, and that had quite a lot of action learning groups and mentoring coaching involved. Now obviously banks tend to be global, large organisations, so enabling people in the same role or in slightly different roles, depending how you decide to do it, to connect up and discuss with each other. You might be looking at a technology solution for that. You might be looking at portals and forums to help you do that. We know that some of the banks we work with allow people to track down and apply to become mentees of known mentors, or to connect up with coaches. And action learning could be run in the same kind of way, that you can group people around their role and allow them to talk, perhaps through forums. You can have group tasks for them to do. But coming back to that tip that we said about trying to create kind of behaviours in people, if people need to work together to do a certain task, then emulate that in your onboarding and bring them together to do those kind of tasks. So hopefully that helps.
So Matt, I can see that you've asked a question around, is there still merit in the 2-day and 1-day event for new employees? I think the answer is yes to that, as long as it's possible to provide them at an accurate point in time. What we've found with some of the larger customers that we've been working with over the last year, they've actually come to us saying, oh, we have this event and we run it for new starters, but we're finding that people aren't getting to the event until maybe 4 or 6 months into them starting, and then it sort of slightly defeats the object of sending them there. So I think the events are fantastic, actually. They're a great way to onboard people. They get to meet new people who are also starting around the same period. They get exposure to the company as a form of insights day, etc. But they're only really effective if people can guarantee that they're being delivered within the first week of somebody actually starting. I think anything past that point, they start to dilute their function, because by then people are picking up those points from everybody else within the business.
And picking up from that, I think it's making sure it's a two-way process. Yes, it's an absolute advantage is meeting people and being able to ask questions and contextualise what you're hearing for yourself. So as we said, it would end up sitting in the bottom left corner if it was just information giving and very one way. So don't waste that opportunity. Make sure you make the best of it by shifting over into the empathy side.
Are there any other questions that people would ask? I'm just looking through now. It looks like they're the only 2 that we've got.
There was one that was coming up. It wasn't really a question for us necessarily, but that you guys were discussing around the term onboarding itself and whether it was appropriate or what alternatives that there might be. It's an interesting one because you hear terms of induction and orientation and onboarding. We've gone with onboarding as a, it's not necessarily a title we'd say to clients to have to use. You could say working with us or welcome to our company or whatever it might be. because it's quite inclusive. Induction sounds like you're being something's happening to you, you are being inducted, so we try to move away from that and make it a bit more inclusive. And orientation is often part of onboarding, which I think Kim said, where it's about finding a way around things. But as we know, onboarding, or whatever it is you call it, is more than just that. Anyone got any other ideas about terms or names, then we're all ears, but it's quite a divisive one. So, more questions there. Do you think the emphasis is on line managers to induct new employees rather than a central onboard team or HR? I'd say probably a bit of a combination. The research that we looked at in order to create the paper that's up on our site did show that how important that line manager relationship is to new recruits in terms of them sticking around and feeling supported. And actually, by starting to onboard someone even pre-hire and making sure they have a sense for what kind of team they'll be working within, maybe even what sort of manager they might have, might help make sure you've got the right fit, or that you're matching them up with the right manager. But I think there does need to be a mixture of kind of, you can't put all the burden on the managers. You need to make sure they're supported and they've got the training they need to help them be coaches and mentors and so on. But there does need to be some central consistency, especially for large programs, lots of employees and global organisations.
And I think there's a key there in terminology as well, that the manager should absolutely be a mentor and not a trainer. And when we were kind of working with TUI on their induction programme, one of their remits was the fact that they needed to alleviate the amount of time it was taking for managers investing in new starters to get them up to scratch. And it's because they didn't have the online resources to take the theory away from them, which enabled them to focus on mentoring the staff. Instead, they were actually having to spend day in, day out teaching them the basics. So I think there's a real key point there, and that is that the manager's role in this is to mentor the person through a training programme and not actually to be the day in, day out teacher of quite granular activities that can be alleviated through other training methods, because you need them to be an effective manager as much as you need your employees to be effective at doing their day job.
I think Sam's asking some good questions then on top of that. So, how much training are you then giving your manager, and how are you onboarding them? So when we look at blend design, or rolling right back actually to your sort of needs and who you're trying to target with your onboarding, we would often look at starting with the leadership and management level and getting them on board with what you're trying to do with the onboarding, make them clear about what their role is, and gap analysis, what training and support they might need. You also need to have a clear sense of how much time you want or can have your managers give that programme. And yes, they could be a mentor, or you might decide to have someone else be the mentor, and the manager needs to play a proper manager role, as Nina was saying as well, where they're supporting and they're checking in and they're having those conversations. That personal phone call that a manager gave someone, as Daniel said, a week before they started, is a really good touch. And actually, I think we got that in our example blend of having that personal contact is almost more important than having them be the trainer, I think.
We've actually got a customer who's done the management training after releasing the induction, and part of that was because they actually felt that they couldn't, that the managers were so bogged down in day-to-day activities, in particular with the onboarding and the training of staff, that they actually couldn't alleviate them to do their own training. So they released the new programme without training the managers, and then that which freed up the time because people were doing more online activity, and it then freed up the managers for them to go and do their training, which then would enable them to be more effective during that onboarding programme. So it could be something that happens beforehand, or it could be something that happens afterwards, and I guess that really depends on the constraint of what's going on with your managers at that point. There's a question here from Matt as well around at what point does onboarding finish, a year or less? To be honest, I don't think there's a definitive answer to that. We've got, if I go back to when I first, I'm not that old, but when I first started working, induction was something that lasted a couple of days, and you rocked up and you sat there for a day reading policy documents, got introduced to a few people, and then you cracked on with your job. But now they're a much bigger concept, to the point where actually they perhaps stop being slightly onboarding, but they are still an essential part to onboarding people into their jobs, because it's now about the orientation period at the beginning, but then there's the compliance, area, and then you're going into product knowledge, and then it's about upskilling them further into their roles where their skill gaps apply. So actually it really depends on the type of person you're employing, what the gap in that skill is, and also their compliancy, but also the complexity of the role and what that role demands of that individual that then dictates how long it runs for.
I think, as Ashley's posted up there, is linking it into continued development and training, so performance management. You know, you can have a fantastic onboarding program that lasts 6 weeks, but if your performance management isn't up to scratch that follows on from that, then you're still at risk of losing that person. So you need to make sure that there's a direct link in, and I think there's a crossover between onboarding and performance management in terms of your onboarding kind of, it's like a funneling effect where you start wide and then you go more and more skills focused, and there needs to be a handover at some point into that skills-based performance management. So, conscious of time, and we might have run out of time for any further questions at this point. Somebody might be trying to add one in there. But thanks very much for those who, firstly for joining us and for contributing and asking us questions today. If you do have any further questions, you can use Twitter. Drop us a line. We've put up well, you can obviously the hashtag up there, and of course you can email us if you want some more in-depth information, or give us a call. So thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you, and have a lovely day.